Hi there, everyone. I've got Steve Schiffman here with me, who has written what, close to 100 books, or 200, or 1,000, isn't
Well,
it?
let's not push it. It's a lot.
It's been
We
quite a
we
few
don't
books, but
have
I'll
to
tell you
push
what,
200 books.
Steve and I have been trying to get together and do an interview on the secrets of selling services here for literally, it's been about 9 months, I think, Steve.
I think so.
And
Yes.
it's been back and forth, and it's as I told you before, it's my fault that we didn't get it, but I'm glad we actually have the opportunity to talk. So I appreciate your time here today, Steve.
Good.
Um, I'm going to jump right into it. Most people, because I've interviewed you before, understand who you are, and I put it in all the blog posts when I put it up. So I'm going to skip past that part so I can maximize our time. But hey, first question I have about selling services, and I deal with a lot of guys that sell services or the intangible. Why do people have such a tough time selling intangible items?
Well, just because of that, the interesting thing is they're so used to showing something and taking something in and saying, "Here's what it looks like. This is what it feels like," that they don't know what to do when it's a service, even though the product or the service is the product. But they have difficulty in explaining that. And part of that is they don't get enough information from the person to see if it really applies. It's like they're trying to throw something at them, but they don't know what it is that the person does in the first place.
So, I mean, is it basically, some of the key differences between selling a product and a service, obviously? I think one of the ones, obviously, being an intangible, but what I always do is because I do sell services, is I sell a lot on kind of how it makes someone's feel once they're utilizing that service as opposed to how, jumping in a car or touching something. I mean, any thoughts on that one, Steve?
Yeah, the basic principle of selling is that you're helping somebody do what they do better. In other words, you're asking what they do, how they do it, when they do it, where they do it, who they do it with, why they do it that way, and then ultimately helping them do what they do better. So a service really does that. That's what a service is all about. Again, the issue is that most people don't understand how to paint a picture. In other words, they have difficulty in painting a picture to somebody so they can visualize that success. If it was a printing press, they could say, "Here, take a look at it," and the guy goes and kicks it and does whatever he does with it. But in service-related industries, it's more difficult. I deal with an insurance company right now that's having a lot of trouble because they fail to recognize that people already have insurance in terms of corporations, and so they don't know how to really paint that picture of saying there's a difference.
Hmm. How,
And let me just go on this that you have to be able to define the difference between your service and somebody else's service because, quite frankly, other people are offering the same thing.
Interesting you would say that. I was just kind of almost going to lead to that you know, I think a lot of people actually have a tough time figuring out what their key differences are compared to who they're dealing with. And,
Yeah.
and literally, what would you recommend to somebody? How would they be able to determine or figure out what they think is their key differences between most of their competitors? How would they go about doing something like that?
Most salespeople don't know how to do it. They actually don't know how to do it. They don't know how to separate themselves out. So there are three things that I tell them that they have to do. One is they have to have insight into the customer or the prospect. So they have to understand what that customer is looking for or thinking about. Number two, they have to be innovative in their approach. So that means they really do have to separate themselves out. Now, I don't mean wearing a funny little green hat, but what I do mean is, are you coming across differently than the other guy, the competition, or are you just doing the same thing he's doing? And the last is the most important. Salespeople today need to be bold, B-O-L-D. They need to be firm. They need to make a commitment. And they need to be able to say at the end, this is why it works, and this is why it works better. They're afraid to say that. They're afraid to say, I've got something that really is better than what you're using now. And the reason that they're afraid to say that is because we've been taught never to knock the customer. I'm sorry, knock the other competitor. But the reality is you are better, or else you shouldn't be in the business.
Absolutely. I think when I mention this, you'll probably agree with me. I think who does a wonderful job, and it goes back to your insurance thing, is State Farm. I don't know if you've seen the ads where it's like a good neighbor,
Hmm.
State Farm's there, and all of a sudden the person pops up, and then the other person goes like,
That's right.
and they mumble. and like their mom shows up in the screen, and it's like the answering.
That's
I
right.
just it's
That's right.
that's
No,
I
I've
mean
seen
they're showing that key
that. I've
differentiator.
seen
It's
it.
the service level that you'll get from this, right?
Well, it's painting the picture. In other words, you've got to visually or verbally paint a visual picture for somebody to say, this is what it's going to do. This is how it's going to help you. You know, it's interesting though, product or service, all said and done, it's still service related. People don't want to buy a product that doesn't have some service component to it. So there really is a component to it that's important.
Absolutely. Hey, so when we're talking about selling intangibles and also selling, say, products and stuff like that, is there a different skill set? I mean, obviously there is. There's a different skill set between selling the intangibles, but is there, if someone's selling products and goes to selling services, there's got to be some sort of crossover there as well that they could leverage. What's one of the key points, or what are one or two of the things that you can take from potentially selling a product into selling the service side?
Yeah. Ultimately, what it comes down to is how does it benefit the person who's buying it? Let's use a printing press just because it's big and it's noisy. So a printing press, the guy can go down, the person can go down and look at it, kick it, and try it, and see what's going to happen. But ultimately, and this is, I'm going to give you a new phrase now. Ultimately, that printing press or the service you're providing, two different businesses, are a seamless commodity. Now let me explain this. A seamless commodity, I assume you have shoes on right now. I'm going to assume that.
Actually, Steve, I don't.
Yeah, I know. That's why I said I got to be careful because you're sitting in your own. But anyway, normally you have shoes on. When you put your shoes on, you don't think about it once you have them on. You may pick out a shoe, but once it's on, it's on. So it becomes seamless. It's not something you're thinking about. The ideal situation in a commodity, is that it's a seamless commodity. In other words, you don't want people to think about it every day, wake up and say, gee, where's my phone? Or gee, where's this? Or I'm going to change this. You want it to be seamless, to run smoothly, and people not to think about it. So the product, you can see that happening, and you want that to be. You don't want people to say, gee, is my printing press or my car going to work well today? At the same time, you don't want to have happening with the products that you're selling, with a service that you're selling, where it becomes an issue for them. So what you're trying to do is sell something that's smooth, something that's seamless, something that they're not thinking about.
It's good response to that. Hey, I on page 35 of your book here, which I'm holding up again.
Thank you.
You go into why using statistics is important in selling services. And yes. I mean, I could read it, but I have my own take on it. I use statistics all the time because it allows me to show someone where a benchmark is and what they could get to. What's your take on it?
Well, I think you need the credibility, and statistics are the credibility factor. I mean, you've got to be able to say to somebody, it works, and here's why it works, and here's some proof for that. We're always trying to figure out what the best approach is. The best approach is that this is what it does, this is how it works, and here's what other people said about it. So we're looking for statistics as backup. Now, I'm not, and I hope that book didn't convey it, I'm not looking to be a statistical guy to say, hey, 99% people say. But I am looking for the statistics that allow me to prove that what I'm selling is good. And it's a quality product, a quality service, if you will. So I think that's the importance of statistics. It's not to overwhelm the person. It's to complement what you're doing. The bigger issue is that we don't raise the issue of our product early enough in the game. In other words, we kind of beat around it. We're not bold. See, the three words are insight, innovation, and bold. Those are the three words. And a sales rep today has to be bold. They have to be able to say, this is going to work for you this way. But they're afraid to say that because we're always afraid to knock the competition, which in essence is what we're doing.
Absolutely. Hey, Steve, one of the things you also brought up in the book is on the internet is that, most people are super educated before they go and start making a decision. I mean, the internet changed everything. I think I was reading
it changed everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Google has the 0 moment of truth, and they talk about and the stats are a little old here, but it used to be 2 or 3 years ago, people go look at 5 different websites. Now they're looking at like 10, 12 websites before they start making decisions. So my question to you is, because the internet has changed everything, people are super educated. What is it that a salesperson can do to add value to a sale?
Well, for one thing, the person has to know what the person has read. You can't go into it and pretend it isn't out there, because for every good thing on the internet, there's some negative thing about it too. I don't care what product you're looking at, what service you're looking at, there's somebody writing about it right now that says it really doesn't work. You got to know that. You got to be able to complement that and work with that and say, okay, here's why they said that, or here was the issue. See, it's no longer the complaints just drift out. The complaints are real and they sit there so people know that that service didn't work, the telephone didn't work, the product the service that they sold didn't work. So people know that. So you've got to be, number one, be aware of what the internet is saying. Number two is people tend to over research every single product today, every single service, and to the point where they are confused. So you need to focus down on 1 or 2 pieces. You can't let them go with 10 concepts. Do that, and they won't know where to go with. They just won't work with it. So you've got to kind of get that focus and say, look, let's just focus in on these 2 services, how these 2 things work, and let's compare them. If we go after 10, we'll be there all day. We'll never get anything.
Absolutely. I think the other thing too is you get educated, and the one thing is you look at a bunch of stuff, but you don't realize or extrapolate what it actually means to you.
That's right. That's right.
I think that could be a huge differentiator if you could start talking through. I mean, what was a book I was reading the other day? I can't remember. Anyways, long story short is they talk about how this person says they need a new air conditioner or something like that to filter out the dust. And in reality, what it is you need new screens on your window. It has nothing to do with this, right? So,
well, no, I think that's an excellent point, though, is that they think they know the answer. The salesperson is supposed to bring the answer. That's why we have salespeople. Salespeople are experts. They're supposed to be experts at their product, at their service. They're supposed to be able to explain it well, understand it, understand all the ramifications. That's why you have a salesperson. I mean, if all the salesperson is doing is carrying numbers with them, we can get that on the internet, and I can order on the internet. And the issue is that people do that. I mean, and then they get the wrong product, and they wonder what happened, or they're not buying the right service for them, and they wonder what happened. It's because there's so much out there. There's so many people that are doing the same thing. You have to learn to compete with that.
Yep, absolutely. Hey, you know what? You brought it up earlier, but there's people that sell the exact same thing as you. What are some of the hints that you can use, or what are some of your little secrets that you can use for selling against people who actually sell the same service as you?
Okay, well, the first thing is, and think about this for a second, the only thing that a salesperson knows when they go to see somebody for the first time, they've never met them, but they go for the first time, is that the person is buying a product similar to theirs, but from somebody else. Mm-hmm. In other words, they're not their customer. But we ignore that. Now, if we were to walk into somebody's office, and I know where you live, so I'm not going to put this in your house, but if you walk into your house and you have a large brown cow in your house, which I'm not going to do, but you have a large brown cow in your house, if I was walking in, I'd say, how come you got the cow here? It's an obvious question because the cow doesn't fit in the house. Doesn't make sense. The salesperson goes into a meeting, knows that the person is buying something similar or is thinking of buying something similar, and never raises that issue of how did you make that decision, or why are you thinking this way? Why do you even think? Use your air conditioner story. Why did you come to the conclusion that the air conditioner is what you needed? How did you reach that conclusion? How did you reach the conclusion about anything? So, but people go in and they just try to sell. So they take out of their back pocket their brochure, and I'll give you an example in a second, lay it down and say, hey, you ought to buy from me. Meanwhile, the guy's got 44 different people up there in his head that he's thinking about. I'll give you a quick example. I'm working with an insurance company. And what the insurance company does, which I find interesting and just unbelievable, they research the company that they're going to, and they did this actually, they research the company they want to sell to. And they couldn't find a lot of information because, quite frankly, a lot of the information on the internet isn't right. But in any case, they come up with a proposal for the first meeting. So what they do is they take the guy out to dinner. It happens to be a man. Takes him out to dinner. That's going to soften him up. Then they're going to shift that proposal underneath the guy's face and say, hey, you ought to buy from us. And they actually think it's going to work. It hasn't worked. Ever, they told me. It hasn't worked, but they still do it.
Well, that's kind of like prescribing before diagnosing.
Of course. I couldn't believe I looked at this and I said, are you serious? You don't even know the person. Well, that's not true. We talked to him 44 years ago. No, you don't know him. And they're going in with a proposal. And the proposal is so weak and it's so irrelevant to what the person is about, because we don't know what the person's about yet until we meet him, that it's ridiculous to do that. It's just beyond me. But people still do that. People still go in with proposals on that first meeting thinking they're going to close.
Yeah. So I guess the long and short of this is, understand the requirements, the needs. These people are educated, but really do some probing to find out, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Does this make sense? Does this not make sense?
That's right. When I open up a sales call and I say to the person, I'm just curious, have you done sales training before? What have you thought about? How's it worked? How did you get to that particular trainer? Or if you haven't done it, why haven't you done it? All those questions give me a picture of that person. Then it allows me to focus in on how I can best help them. Sales training is one of those anomalies that you go, what does it do? And it won't do anything unless there's reinforcement. So a lot of people do sales training simply because they're supposed to do it, but it doesn't do anything unless you reinforce it, unless you have a good program, unless the instructors are good, and all those variables. And it's the same with everything else. It's not just buying it. It's got to work for them, and you have to make the recommendation how to get the best results.
Absolutely. Hey, so one of the ones too is when you're selling against an entrenched supplier. We kind of just talked a bit about that, like why you have this brown cow sitting here and stuff like that. What's a couple of things you can do to actually really tilt the potential sale in your favor? What would you suggest?
I'll tell you something interesting. I did a webinar this morning with a company, and they said, well, we've got a lot of people that are selling the product and all that stuff. And I said, out of curiosity, how do you know you're talking to the right person? And they went, what do you mean? I said, well, first of all, if you're going to uncouple them, you've got to find out who the right person is. What they do is go in, and whoever they end up speaking to, that's the right person. I said, well, that's not going to work. You've got to understand how and why they made that decision. And in doing that, you'll find out the who. And then you can address it. But you can't address it to the wrong person because that doesn't matter. I could want to sell something, $1 million to somebody, and they say to me, nah, I'm not interested, simply because they're not the ones that are interested in that. And so you've got to understand the buyer. It's as important to understand the buying process as it is to understand the selling process.
Gotcha. That absolutely makes sense. Hey, one last thing. I'm going to ask you one last question here. Building your personal brand, you kind of go into it in here. And I truly believe that every salesperson should build some sort of personal brand around themselves. It's a key. It's a massive differentiator. I do it right now.
Right.
I do interviews with excellent authors like yourself, and it helps me build credibility as well. But how would you? First of all, why would someone want to build the personal brand? And two, how can they go about it? What would you say?
Well, it goes with what I said before, innovation. You have to separate yourself out. If I chose 10 salespeople selling the same service, they will look the same. They will act the same, and they'll ask the same questions and answer the same questions the same way. You have to be different. You have to find something within yourself that separates you out. I don't care what that is. It could be the way you dress. It can be the way you stand, it can be the way you speak, it's the way you present something, but you have to do something different that's going to make you stand out. If you're like everybody else, you're like everybody else, and no one's going to remember you. No one will remember. You've got to find a way in which you can get people to listen to you and say, gee, I remember that. Now, I won't go as far as this, but actually I like the concept. If you could do it, the concept is going in and taking a photograph, which you can now with the phone, of your prospect. So you say, I want to remember you. I want to remember. Well, that sounds ridiculous, except that separates you out. I remember a guy years ago from GBC, a stationery company, where this particular rep, at the end of the sales call, after you bought something, he gave you a hug. Now, this guy was an animal. I mean, he was as big as you could be. But in giving you the hug, he just got you there, you know? You couldn't forget him. You could never forget the guy. And now that's an extreme. But you know what? That's not such an extreme. It's, how many people really write thank you notes? Really write thank you. They all say they do. How many people call up people and see, for example, I bought a car a couple months ago from a family-owned dealer. Got it? Family-owned dealer. We treat you like family.
Yep.
So I go in, I buy the car, and boom, 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 do the thing. I haven't heard from them in 6 months.
Wow.
Yet, even though they say we treat you like family, well, you know what? I don't want to belong to that family anymore. I've decided that's not my family.
That's, you know, you've hit the nail on the head on a lot of this stuff, right? So it's like, what is the, you know, what is it that you do? What's the extra mile that you go? You just mentioned thank you cards, right? I still remember the last time I got a thank you card, and I'll mention it. It's from Glenmore Audi here in Calgary, and it's when I bought my car 6 years ago, or at least a car 6 years ago. And then I subsequently got another one from him, and I never got a thank you card. I was kind of gypped, actually. I felt pretty bad. Although
yeah,
I have to give them kudos. They actually sent me a gift afterwards, so you know, they actually did something nice. So I'm not going to hold them against that one. But I cannot remember the last time. Now, flip side, I write a thank you note to absolutely every single new person that I meet, every single sale I get, and just out of the blue, thanks for doing stuff. And the reason being, I don't know, Dave Kirpin, he's in your neck of the woods. I don't know if you know Dave or not. He's a McGraw-Hill author as well. Dave did a study, and he said, I can't remember the exact stats, but it was, he had a client, donor.org, and they sent thank you cards to 1,000 people, and they didn't send thank you cards to 1,000 people. So they had these two separate groups. And what they did was they actually went back 6 months later, and the group that got the personalized thank you card not only donated more, you know, frequently, they actually donated more money than the other group.
It's interesting.
And it was astronomical. It was like 40% of them actually donated more. Right. So it's just the thank you cards work. It's one of those little special things. We're off on a tangent, but I mean, it really does. It comes down to
no, because salespeople will tell you that they do it, but they don't. It's like I can tell you 90% of salespeople, when somebody says, well, I'm not interested, they go, okay, and they hang up. Yep. They'll tell you they don't say that, but that's what they do. It's the same thing with the note, the same thing with the little email that says, hey, thanks a lot for allowing me to blah, 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 whatever it is to meet with you. They don't do it. So how can they expect it to separate out from everybody else?
You know, the other thing, too, is that I find it absolutely intriguing. This is something that I'm kind of off on a tangent now again, but the other thing is the lack of, first of all, if you meet with somebody, try to connect with them on LinkedIn or some sort of social media if you can. But, I mean, if you're in a business and you connect with this person, you're on LinkedIn. The other thing is, I call it the planets aligning. So they may not buy from you today, but they may 3 months or 3 years down the road, right?
That's right.
At some point in time, planets are going to align, and you're going to end up being top of mind if you're staying in front of this person on a consistent basis.
Yes,
right?
yes.
So.
Because people move from job to job, situations change, and if they remember you, they'll call you. At least you have a chance. If you don't do anything, you have no chance.
Yeah.
You have no chance whatsoever.
Absolutely. Well, I'll tell you what, Steve, I greatly appreciate your time here today. I'm going to hold the book up again,
great.
Secrets of Selling Services. And
buy this book. Buy this book.
Yep, buy this book. And do you have any other new ones that are out?
I have something called 75 techniques, unique techniques for sales. That's really a great book. I got a call from somebody who said, this is a knockout book, and people should do it. 75 techniques for closing sales. It's a great book, new book.
Perfect. Well, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll go get it, and I'd love to interview you again on that stuff.
I would love to talk about that book.
Perfect. Well, once again, I got Steve Schiffman here. Hey, Steve, if anyone wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way they can reach you?
Best way, just call me 212-836-4719 or S Schiffman, SCHIFFMAN at steveschiffman.com.
Excellent. And you're available for hire and training, aren't you?
I'm available for hire for anything.
Really? You come over and paint my fence this weekend?
Well, not everything, but something.
Hey, Steve, I appreciate.
I'm getting too old for everything, but something.
Yeah, no, you know what? I'm in my mid-40s. I'm too old for everything except for just doing whatever. I'm looking forward to this early retirement that I have. So.